Written and directed by Douglas Plomitallo. We are talking Halloween Candy. And this is a very low budget horror anthology movie. The budget was reportedly around $18,000, so it is pretty low budget. And it's an anthology film that has a wraparound story and then a few kind of short films in between. So the wraparound story concerns this female author as she is trying to write a book, but she is distracted because her daughter is spending Halloween with her husband and she's kind of annoyed about it, and because of this she's kind of lost her inspiration, and she gets inspiration from various trick-or-treaters that come round during Halloween. But she actually has her own story. There's stuff going on with her which I won't sort of spoil. There's a mysterious kind of Michael Myers style clown figure, and then some other stuff will happen, and then obviously you get the little short films as well. So this again is a very low budget film, so expectations in place. Let's discuss. So I will say on the positives first of all, the best story here is in my opinion at least, the wraparound story, which has a reasonable amount of screen time. We get quite a lot of extended segments whilst we have the kind of the in-betweens of these different short films, plus a relatively extended intro and outro. And I have to say, I think the acting is probably the strongest, and the story is the most well developed and the best executed. I'm not going to spoil what actually happens, obviously, but to me this was the strongest one, and I don't have too many negatives about it. Ultimately, I actually think that kind of the concept was quite good, and it had a reasonable sort of surprise, and is probably the most. None of these films are scary exactly, but I would say it's the most sort of threatening, and it was pretty well done, I have to say. And gives an interesting kind of moral quandary to a large degree. So that one I got to say I quite liked. But that, to be fair, I will say that's the only movie out of this collection of short films that I genuinely liked. Some of the short films I thought had some good ideas, but I think the execution, possibly down to the budget, was a little lacking. Out of the short films, I think probably the best out of those I liked was the very final one, where we have a guy on a date with a kind of a mute girl, and there's stuff going on involving a serial killer. I thought this was the kind of the most fun out of these ideas, and probably again had the most fun idea, and actually had a little bit of a reasonable twist with it, I would suggest. That I kind of quite liked, but there are a couple of others which I think had some okay ideas, but the execution was poorer. For example, we have one where a group of kind of like mean girls are Halloween doing like a Ouija board, and they are trying to contact a dead friend who actually died because of drink driving on their part. So I thought that had somewhat of a poignant moment, but I think it's underscored by the final kind of like minute or so of the film, where it has the supernatural element revealed. And as is with a lot of problems with these sort of films, I don't think it went far enough. It didn't really kind of have enough of the gotcha moments and things like that. But it had an interesting kind of idea, and I thought the girls were okay. And there's one or two others I think had some fair ideas, but just weren't kind of pulled off all that well. And that obviously leads me to what doesn't work. And I think this is a film which obviously is very low budget and then suffers for that. But the ideas, as I said, are sometimes okay. Some of them they just feel like a waste of time. But there are a couple. There's probably about half of where I think where the idea is reasonable, but it's just not expanded upon, and you feel like the movie kind of cuts off too early. The kind of the horror like twist or surprise isn't fully developed, doesn't really kind of land in regards to kind of impact or anything like that. But there are some where I film, this is like the first short story, for example, you're kind of waiting for something to happen and it never really does. And that involves this guy who's running like a scare house, and there's an employee that he's refusing to pay because he's going to broke character, and then he hears like spooky sounds in this scare house, and it's okay. And then it's really much of nothing, I have to say. And like one of his associates gets murdered completely innocently, and rather than just calling the police, he just, you know, that he just goes, oh, you know, I'll go and like investigate. It's just like, that's stupid. So yeah, but it's a little silly at times, I've got to say. I have to talk about the tone of this film in general. Now, this plays a little bit like a sort of younger person's horror film. So think along the lines of Goosebumps, because there's never really any gore, there's never really any kind of violence, there's not actually any type of really scarier elements. There's a couple of times, mostly in that, and the wraparound where it is a little eerie. It's a little, you know, the kind of the fog and some of the kind of the visual imagery is a little eerie, but not scary as such. So it kind of feels like it's meant to be like a younger person's, more of a family-friendly sort of horror film. Do younger kids are interested in low-budget B-movies? I don't know in this day and age, to be honest. But I would also say that it has a reasonable amount of swearing in it. So, is it meant to be for younger people? Because it has quite a lot of swearing. Especially the final song that plays over the credits is incredibly suggestive, one might say. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure who this movie is made for, because the general tone of it and seems to be quite young, but then it has, like I say, a reasonable amount of swearing and stuff in it. Now again, this is one of the lowest budget anthology I think I've kind of reviewed here, so we do have to take some notes of that into consideration about the quality of it, because it's such a kind of low budget film. And it does have quite a big cast, because all of these short films have different actors and stuff, but I don't think the acting was solid in the majority of them, unfortunately. The acting is a little weak overall. Some fare better than others. Overall, I've got to say it's a very disappointing horror anthology, I think, for most. It really doesn't add anything to the kind of the conversations, and I think the good ideas maybe that it did have weren't fully embraced or fully realised. So I feel this movie is probably a film that is almost like a prototype for maybe something else that could come out with maybe a bit of budget and a little bit more of a production on it and better writing ultimately. But if you're a big, you know, anthology fan and you like a Halloween themed one, then it's certainly one maybe outside of the swearing it would appeal to younger people, then maybe you ought to give it a go. As it stands at the moment, because of the budget, I'll be a little bit more generous perhaps than I would normally, but I'm still going to say this is a below average film. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.